Welcome, everybody. We are back, and what we're doing here today is we are taking a look at the absolute brilliance of Attack on Titan episodes 53 and 54. But first, a little story time. Long, long ago, in a land far away, was a foolish samurai. Oh, wait, no, that's something else. Back in the 90s, though, which is a pretty goddamn long time ago, I caught this show where this dude in an orange karate outfit was fighting this guy in white armor, blue pants, and the punches and the fighting was brutal. The guy in the orange karate gi just caved in the ribcage of this other dude. One of them flies into the air and he starts glowing with this purple energy. And the other character's in a panic and he's like, I'm at my limit. And he decides to dip into his last reserves. At one point, there's this fat blue guy watching the battle. He's got these big antennas. Anyway, they fire these massive beams of pure energy at each other. The collision of these beams causes bodies to go flying. Chunks of rock disintegrate in the air. It's just pure, unfiltered power everywhere you look. I had never seen anything like this show. But everything was so clear that I didn't need to have ever seen that show before. I understood the stakes, I understood the world, I understood the characters, because the visual storytelling and the voice acting and the scripting, all of it was so perfectly laid out. And that show was Dragon Ball Z. And that was the literal first time I had ever seen anime. I'd been a comic book reader my whole life. I have a massive comic book collection. When I'm watching the 90s X-Men, and the 90s Spider-Man, there were no punches allowed in the 90s Spider-Man. So the action and the violence and the fighting part of a lot of these superhero shows was very much toned down. So to watch a show like that, where you see a guy's fist cave another guy's ribs in, it was something very, very different and something that was wholly unique on American television at the time. So how does that tie in to Attack on Titan 53? See, I tried to tackle it from the lens of a young me. I'd never seen Attack on Titan, and I just happened to sit down and just by luck, I caught episode 53. What would I think? And when I did that little experiment, it reaffirmed how impressive and amazing Attack on Titan truly is. And what I found reaffirmed my love for this series on a deeper level than I thought possible. Doing this confirmed what the often unreliable and easily manipulated IMDb scores were indicating. This series is a masterpiece. But don't just take my word for it. Let's take a look at the episode and break down in detail the brilliance of Attack on Titan episodes 53 and 54. Starting right here with episode 53. We open on a shot of the colossal Titan rising. Now, coming into this episode cold, so to speak, depicts a scene of complete devastation. Homes are on fire. This monolithic, skinless demon kneels solemnly in the center of town. If you were completely unfamiliar with the series, you'd be asking, what happened here? How'd this giant thing get here? Where the hell are the people? Coming into this episode cold would leave you inundated with burning questions. Now, positioning is an often used tool in animation and film. Space taken up usually indicates dominance for one character or an insurmountable obstacle for the other. Here, we have that simple dynamic laid out perfectly. If we had any questions about the alignment of the colossal Titan as a protagonist or antagonist, those are quickly addressed as he begins demolishing people's homes. And the appearance of the houses gives off the feeling of a quaint little village, which makes the havoc that he's wreaking all the more easy to get behind as the mark of a true villain. Of course, this is speaking as if I am new to the series. Following the series allows you to be treated to the spectacle that is true, morally gray area, as well as fantastic character development. A brief moment of levity is allowed, as Connie begins losing it and gets bonked in the head. Still, this isn't played totally for laughs. The other characters are still really intense. It's understated, but it further gets across the desperation of their situation. It also allows our characters to display some vulnerability. John demonstrates his commanding presence, while Connie shows aspects of his character as comic relief. I love how multiple characters have clearly reached the same conclusion, while also explaining the actions of the Colossus Titan so that it doesn't come off as wanton destruction for destruction's sake. This isn't just a monster, it's a thinking entity. It needs to find this group of completely outmatched heroes, so it is trying to smoke them out, so to speak. Eren then goes and, Erens up the place with an expression of anger, and we instantly want to see him take down this monster with his own hands because he points out that this is his city. It's his home. We can easily empathize with and root for a character who's defending their home. It's at this point that I notice all of the vegetation on the homes, and I notice how many of these are damaged. Now, through this part of the series, Armin has had this arc, and that arc is perfectly summed up in a mere handful of seconds. He's asked for orders, and his face is just fraught with apprehension and confusion. So he flashes back to Berthold calling him out for being scared to act, and in response, he relinquishes command to John. And again, the vulnerability he's showing allows us to empathize with him, and the flashback helps us understand the conflict that he is faced with. He's a part of this obviously much larger conflict, and is tasked with figuring out a way to beat this seemingly unconquerable foe. John, he starts sweating visibly. Clearly uncomfortable, but he grants the request anyway and takes the reins. He prioritizes staying alive and out of sight with his first orders, but pushes this back on Armin with his second order, because John admits, even though he can read situations fairly well, it's Armin who is the brilliant tactician, and it's Armin who has to figure out how to get out of this. It's at this point that a multi-front battle is revealed. We see one soldier named Levi consult with a subordinate. A ring of titans and their leader, the Beast Titan, are both identified. We also see the blades in the characters' hands and can quickly begin to surmise how these characters fight. Along with the quaint village, we get a sense for the type of technological era that this all takes place in. Levi makes a comment about the Titans having no balls, a comment which would initially be lost on a new viewer, but one that becomes appreciably hilarious once getting a look at the anatomically lacking Titans. He also recaps what recently happened, that there was some kind of explosion that took place which helps explain the lack of humans where the Colossal and other characters are. Right then, a bombardment of rocks wipes out entire swaths of the outer village, and we see mists of blood rising with the dirt. That is a tremendous touch to foreshadow what is quickly confirmed, that many of the soldiers were immediately and brutally murdered in the attack. The Beast Titan is shown having just completed the throw, and his role as leader is further highlighted when he's seen issuing orders to the Cart Titan. He also makes baseball references, which is fascinating in its weirdness coming from a giant monster. Then, Erwin's first act of the episode is to assess and order all of his soldiers out of the line of fire. As for those soldiers, we see them looking confused, worried, terrified. One of them is reduced to covering his ears like a child. This establishes how completely out of their depth these soldiers are. They're not blindly brave warriors. These characters, they come off as all too human. Levi, by contrast, he bravely leaps toward the front lines, trying desperately to warn his comrades, but to no avail. Look at this again. It's hauntingly gorgeous, this visual of a sea of blood mist. And Erwin, from his perch high above the battlefield, seems almost like he's bathed in it. There's a shot of the shock and fear in his eyes, and it helps highlight how unprepared even their leader is for this madness. His actions that he takes later on, if you contrast them to this moment, It really does a fantastic job of highlighting how brave and how badass he really is. We get another shot of scared soldiers, this time all bathed in a red haze, the blood of their own comrades who were wiped out in an instant. Now here's something that's awesome. Great character building as Levi takes a moment to grab a soldier who's screaming in terror during the next bombardment. And then, again, to help, let's say, a potentially new viewer, he makes it a point to ask about what happened on the other side of the wall. This episode is taking the time to really highlight Levi's drive to protect his fellow soldiers, which will make the next 2 episodes all the more sad for him. What's more, the dialogue between Levi and Erwin quickly summarizes why they can't just run away. And when I reach this point of the episode, it's almost as if this particular episode were perfectly written for a new viewer. Maybe they knew how good these episodes were and wanted to make it easy for a new viewer to latch on. Or maybe Isayama is just that good of a writer, so he clearly lays out his story in a way that constantly advances the plot in a way that's clear and logical. Speaking of logical, we get to see the show's adherence to logic, consequences, and on top of that, we get a fantastic subversive moment all in one as John comes up with a desperate plan. See, they know of the need to protect the horses, so John asks Eren to try and hold back the Colossus Titan's legs. And I love how, as Eren is running, most of his body is initially out of the frame because he is too tall to fit. This allows Eren to feel a little more powerful and a little less overmatched. The music swells, Eren roars, and begins to struggle against this giant leg. The characters start to express hope, and it's every anger-filled shonen moment in a nutshell until Armin is the first to realize it. Eren isn't pushing the Colossus back. The Colossus is pulling Eren back, right before punting him into the wall. By the way, the fact that we take a second to see the horror on the look of the previously hopeful faces of the other characters is great. The fact we even take time to see Levi and Erwin on the other side, getting a picture of how poorly it's going on the inner wall front, it's absolutely fantastic work. I mean, this creates a cohesiveness in timing and in events. It's what I like to think of as kind of the crossover effect. Think of like Spider-Man versus Batman, right? Goku versus Superman. Crossovers are always a blast, even if it's a mini crossover between the 2 separate events that are occurring in this very battle. We cut back to John, who laments his inability to come up with a good plan. And as he discusses their need for a Hail Mary, there's a shot of Armin, which clearly helps frame him as once again their only hope. Desperate to do anything at all, they launch one last counterattack, a distraction. 3 of them fly in front of the Titan and hurl insults, while another one sneaks up from behind. And we again see that the Titan is intelligent. It sees through the obvious distraction and uses a steam area of effect attack to prevent the explosive spears from landing. It's at this point that the characters have to face reality. Nothing works. They cannot take down this one Titan. You see the burden that this places on Armin as his friend, still hopeful, asks if he has come up with a counterattack yet. She doesn't sound desperate. She's very businesslike. It's as if she has full confidence that Armin will undoubtedly come up with a plan to take down this one Titan. The group then begins to stare in horror. And I'm thinking they're just truly sinking into despair, knowing that they have nothing with which to take down this one Titan. Then the smoke clears, and holy fucking shit. All this, and it's only halfway through the episode. Think about all the things that this episode gets right, without even being halfway done. I could make a list of dozens of things, but I'm gonna settle for just 5. So here's my top 5 reasons why this episode was absolutely brilliant. Number 1, it clearly establishes key characteristics and roles in no less than 6 of the main hero characters. Without watching a single episode in advance, you know Armin's job as a brilliant tactician, Levi's relentless drive to protect, Connie's a knucklehead, Erwin's got this cold and calculated persona, John's got a great ability to lead, and Eren's the typical angry shonen trope.
We even get time to show how piss-scared the cannon fodder characters are. I mean, just a little further into the episode, one of them, named Flock, beautifully summarizes the horror that most individuals likely feel in this awful world before they're horrifically killed. He touches on the existential horror that most people have by the time they're in their mid-30s. He realizes that we're not special. We're not unique. Whatever big plans you had in your life, forget them. Because odds are you'll be metaphorically, or in Flock's case literally, ground up and spit out by the harsh realities of the world. The characterization in this episode, and in this series, is worthy of all the praise I can give it, and then some. 2. It's a cliche, but show, don't tell. With a small handful of visuals, effectively communicate who we should root for. This episode does that. The use of camera positioning and framing is brilliant to that effect. My favorite highlights are when Erwin is immersed in a sea of blood, a red mist that practically assaults the senses with how high a price his decisions come with. The ability to make me forget about how physically outmatched Eren is? Yeah, that's thanks to how framing makes Eren look massive and powerful when the episode wanted to make me think I was about to see some kind of typical angry shonen power move. Speaking of which, number 3, subversion.
Yeah, it's a dirty word now, but when used right, when used sparingly, and when used in a way that does not obliterate nearly half a goddamn century's worth of lore,
subversion can be awesome.
So, when Eren starts pushing back a leg that's literally more than twice his size, and it's revealed that he might as well be a prisoner trapped with Rorschach,
I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me.
It's a brilliant bit of subversion. So with this bit, it's more like, you're not pushing back my leg, I'm pulling back you. So you had that bit of great, typical shonen angry power-up trope subversion. And hell, even giving the cannon fodder a chance to shine. That's a subversion, and a very welcome one, because it humanizes every single unfamiliar face, and gives you a chance to really feel the impact of what's being done to these people. I know that Flock is hated, which is fair because he's written to be quite hateable, but looking at him as a narrative tool, he's used brilliantly in a way very few creators would even think to try. Isayama humanizes the cannon fodder of the series, right at the time where we pretty much just shrug at the death of anybody who isn't a recognizable face. Through Flock, he speaks to the plight of the commoner, but he also touches on the existential dread that most people feel in real life once they reach a certain point. While none of us are likely going to be surrounded by boulders hurled by a giant monkey, we can all empathize with dying a meaningless death after living a meaningless, unremarkable life in which we were raised to think we'd be anything but unremarkable and meaningless. So not only does he subvert our expectations, but he also ties that in with touching on some very real angst and very real dread that pretty much anybody can relate to. Hell, even if you've ever been alone, ostracized, felt like a loser, felt like you didn't belong, I would think that the fear expressed by Flock, the fear that all of those soldiers feel at that moment, is probably something that you can easily relate to. Number 4, the plot and its coherent flow. I don't know if I was just lucky that I picked this episode, or if it's something Isayama purposely pulls off consistently, but the plot progression is so easy to pick up on that characters can easily, naturally, catch a new viewer up on everything that is happening. Having so many distinct characters also allows for a wide variety of reactions and commentary on the action, so we, as the audience, get to learn about the plot, the dilemma, the characters, and their abilities without awkward exposition. 5. Everything. I know it's cheating, but if you hadn't noticed, there's a bit of a theme. Every bullet point that I mentioned mixes with the others. The strong characters and the subversive moments, they help push the plot along. The simple, easy-to-understand plot allows the characters to discuss the situation in unique ways, catching the audience up without wasting time on awkward exposition. The visuals also spell out the general situation to help in this regard. Hajime Isayama hit a grand slam with the formula of his show, and he takes advantage of that formula to full effect in every aspect of his series. I could talk about the art, the voice acting, where, again, for me, Flock's mewling breakdown is a particularly chilling highlight. The swell of the music, combined with the execution of Erwin's plan and the exhilaratingly dynamic movement of Levi later in the episode, this girl, her hilarious yet bone-chilling response to Erwin's plan, Levi's decision, Erwin's decision, Erwin's haunting nightmare, Erwin's absolute, truly astounding speech. Really, Erwin's pretty much everything. Although that does bring me to my one complaint. Later on in the episode, it was very difficult to see the action because of Erwin's giant balls blocking pretty much the entire screen. There's so much more to this episode, and I don't want to spoil it necessarily. Seriously, go watch the whole series. Or maybe just start with episode 53. Bask in the brilliance, and thank me later. So that's it. It's good to be back. Things will continue to be quite hectic for me for a while. As we speak, I'm in a literal closet, bent over, trying to be close to the microphone. Just, right now the situation is just not conducive to frequently doing videos and putting out videos. So, we'll see what happens, but probably pace will pick up again around November, December. And I will try to have a part 2 for the rest of episode 53 by then. And I'll keep people updated. Thank you very much for those of you who are listening. And special thank you to Luke and Mr. Berman. Your enthusiasm and the way you guys are all excited, like, oh, he's back. That was pretty awesome. That makes doing the videos more than worth it. Anyway, Sasagayo, motherfucker. Music and link in the description below.